Yeah, yeah, Johnson. Yes.
Yes, sir. Actually, I had a doubt regarding running field experiments in a randomized manner. Like, if we are doing a survey, how could we do it in randomized manner?
Uh, okay, hi Johnson. So I do not know about randomized control trials or conducting field experiments. I have not done that before, so I've just read papers on that. I've never done it, so I may not be the right guy to advise you on that.
Okay, that's a very safe answer. Yeah, Eden actually works on qualitative research. So the type of research we speak in microeconometrics school is mostly done by economists as randomized experiments or quasi-random. We'll speak about that in a later context. Uh, I uh, I just want to ask you about just because you worked on supply chain of e-waste. And I just want to know, when you planned your qualitative research survey, qualitative research methodology, how was your thoughts about sample, who should be part of it, and how would you like the representativeness and stuff like that?
See, so that is largely driven by the question I had. So in my case, my objective here was, because I was studying the entire industry rather than focusing only on scrap dealers or only on recyclers. My objective was I need to cover respondents from the government, from the NGOs, from the manufacturers, from the scrap dealers, like whoever is part of this industry in some way, I need to cover at least one of them. So, like for example, what I was trying to say is, look, suppose there are 10 stakeholders in this industry, which comprises NGOs, recyclers, manufacturers, policymakers, retailers. So I had to cover all of these, at least one respondent from all of these. So because that was largely driven by what question I had in mind, and the nature of sampling was purposive. It was not statistical sampling that way. It was like I had a preconceived idea that, look, these are the kind of respondents that I would be needing, and I did cold calls. I directly called them up, found them in LinkedIn, found them in industry conferences. So when I found these kind of people, I was like, okay, this guy is more appropriate for my study. Let me try to contact him and request for his time. So it was like a pre-planned, purposive sampling that was in place. There was no hard and fast rules as to when to stop the sampling. What is the right sample size? So there is actually no. So even the literature doesn't talk about. So there is no consensus as to what is the sample size for a qualitative research. So because that is largely driven by the funding, how much time you have to complete your research, what is the nature of your question, and are you a seasoned researcher or a doctoral candidate and all that. So it was like the doctoral advisory committee was okay with my sample size, and I said this is what I can do, the maximum given the funding that I have. That's it. So it was kind of a qualitative, subjective kind of a consensus that was arrived at.
Okay, so let's wait for 4 minutes. I mean, or
So what I can do is I can switch off my microphone and video. You can continue with your conversations if
no,
you are.
it's not like that. It's just that
Okay.
we came upfront so that everything is set.
Oh,
So
okay, okay.
just
No,
to
because
test.
you asked, yeah, you also asked me to join early, so that's why I joined.
Yeah, thanks. Ed. So the thing is, we don't know how it turns around because net is not really reliable these days.
Nothing is reliable, no. Forget. What
Okay,
is the what is the one thing that is reliable?
I don't know.
So so
So
so all these statisticians are now telling even statistical significance is not reliable. So it is
yes.
like, it's a, I don't know, I don't know what to say. So let's see. It's okay if the net is not reliable. It's okay. We will proceed somehow, and let's see what we can do.
We can start then because all are here. The other person is has her own ways. She joins always late, so we can start. And it's we
Okay.
have already started recording. So
Oh, okay. So then let me start. So okay, so let me start with my presentation. So before I get to all this, so first let me thank Altaf and all of you who are interested to know about this paper. Thank you so much for inviting me for this presentation. Now, in this presentation, what I'm going to cover is the crux of the article that we had written. So I'm not going to present all the details which is there in the EPW article, because that is there for all of us to read. But I'm just presenting, okay, what is the most important idea that was presented there, so that then we can have a discussion about it. Maybe you can, read up the article, come up with better ideas. I don't know. So the floor is open after that. So let me cover the crux of this presentation. So I am T.S. Krishnan, and my co-authors were Papi Reddy and M.V. Ramana. Okay, to set the context of this article, right? So before we get into the statistical significance and other issues, let me give a brief understanding of the context. So the context is, so in Kerala, there is this coastal belt of Karunagapalli, where there are large quantities of naturally occurring radioactive material. Because of that, you can find the black color in sands. Okay, now this results in levels of radiation, which is a constant presence among the people who live in that area. Now, in the literature in radiation, this is called as high natural background radiation. So this is significantly different from a mobile phone or a nuclear power plant kind of radiation. So this is naturally occurring. This is there in the background, and this is a constant presence that actually it affects or not affects, but people who inhabit in that area, they have so they are exposed to this kind of radiation. That is why it is called as high natural background radiation, or HNBR. Now, a lot of academic papers have been, people have studied the impact of this background radiation on health. And this question has resulted in so many academic papers over decades, starting from 1970s onwards. So most of these researchers are either from the Atomic Research Center or from the Regional Cancer Center in Kerala and in many other places. So international scientists have also visited this particular locality, and they have tried to do a lot of experiments to see whether this background radiation impacts health or not. Now, what do we mean by observable impact on health? Health in this context means incidences of cancer. Among newborns, it is stillbirth or a lot of these congenital anomalies, DNA changes, modifications, and so on. So by health, what we are talking about is very, very serious health issues. It is not nausea or headache or dizziness or anything like that. These are non-reversible, like chronic ailments that have been documented in a lot of literature that background radiation may lead to this. So these studies have been trying to explore this linkage between radiation and health. In the context of our discussion today, by radiation, I mean high natural background radiation. And by health, I mean all these kind of, cancer, Down syndrome, stillbirth, DNA changes, very serious health hazards, which is affecting a lot of people in the population. So radiation and health. So these are the two concepts which we are concerned about in this particular article. Now, Kerala HNBR studies. A lot of these scientific studies, it can be randomized control trials, or it can be like taking means of samples of people living in high background radiation areas versus people not living in those areas. A lot of these studies have been done, and the essence of these studies is that the relation between background radiation and these adverse health effects is not statistically significant. We'll get into the what do they mean by all that, but this has been the crux of these studies, or the main finding of these studies. Now, for example, let us discuss two such studies. Like, for example, this paper, which is in Journal of Community Genetics. Now, what this says is, based on the study which they had done in this area, what they say is, look, at present there is no evidence to suggest any statistically significant association of adverse health effects with so and so radiation. Now, what do they mean by statistical significance? It is the same thing, 5%, 1%, 10%, whatever it is. So they say that, look, with 5% level, it is not significant, and hence there is no evidence to suggest that radiation causes adverse health effects. Let us look at another paper, which is published in the Health Physics Journal. Now, in this paper, if you look at a direct quotation in that paper, it's like analysis of Karunagapalli cohort data, adjusting for all the other factors, shows no significant relationship between radiation, and the adverse health part. So again, the focus is on that statistical significance that is there. So these papers, and there are many such papers which I have documented in the article in more detail. But the essence is this. So scientists have gone ahead, collected samples, did multiple regression analysis, some did some control trials and all that. But at the end of the day, most of these scientists were not able to establish a statistical significant association between radiation and health. Now, so these are the studies done by scientists. Okay. Now, most of these scientific studies have been interpreted by the media in different ways. One common way is this. So let us take this article. It is so rather than focusing on the what is the nature of this media, which newspaper, which author, the way it has been interpreted is this. Look at this. There is no major birth defects, that is adverse health effects found in high natural radiation areas of Kerala. And look at these wordings. Now it is official. There was a general perception that radiation causes these adverse health effects, but now all these scientists from government of Kerala, BARC, etc., have demonstrated that there is no scientific basis for this perception. So what has been happening is the media has looked at these kind of studies, scientific published studies, and because it showed no statistical significance, they have interpreted this in this particular way. So let us continue this article once again. If you read these lines, the researchers did not find statistically significant differences in the prevalence of all these adverse health effects and all that. And then there are a lot more other details. Then another study published in Health Physics says no excess cancer risk. Excess in the sense whether it is statistically significant or not. So in essence, what they're concluding is, look, there is no scientific evidence to show that population that is exposed to this kind of background radiation may suffer any adverse health effects. So this is how these scientific studies have been interpreted by popular media. And this is not a what you call a single article. There are many such articles which have taken these Kerala HMBR studies to tell the world that, look, people in Kerala have been living in background radiation for decades, and scientists have done a lot of studies. They have not been able to establish significant relationship between radiation and health. So this is what has been interpreted by the popular media, international as well as national. And the details of these studies we have listed in that article in more detail. So the key point is this: scientific studies have been invoked to make the claim that radiation exposure is not a significant threat to health. Okay. Now, so this is what we have been discussing so far. So we discussed about scientists doing a lot of studies, then media interpreting these studies and the statistical significance. Now let us get back to our bread and butter, our basic econometrics. So this is a book which I had studied as part of my doctoral program and otherwise also. So this is a very, this is a basic econometrics book, Gujarati, all of us will be familiar with it. Now, this book has a section which says statistical significance is not equivalent to practical significance. So they have a long discussion in the book, and the final point they make is this. The point of all the discussion is that one should not confuse statistical significance with practical or economic significance. So when I read this book and then when I read these news articles, I was like, okay, there is something going on here. The econometrics that is taught to me says this, but when I read the popular media, they were interpreting the significance in a different way. So that is where me, Papi, and Ramana, we wanted to explore what is actually happening. Is there a serious issue in misinterpreting or misconceiving the results in a way that it is not supposed to be? So now let us get into a discussion of what actually is statistical significance, which is spoken or discussed in the basic econometrics sense. So we have this null hypothesis, H naught. So in this case, the H naught is that background radiation has got no impact on health, no relation. Alternate hypothesis is, yes, it has some relation. Similarly, in other contexts, you have a null hypothesis which you want to nullify, and then an alternate hypothesis. Okay. Now, so there are two possibilities. One is in real H naught is true, or when H naught is false. Now, after doing a scientific study by collecting a sample, doing all the tests, and then we fail to reject the null hypothesis, or we reject the null hypothesis. These are the two possibilities that are there. Now, what is happening is, if we fail to reject the null hypothesis when null hypothesis is true, there is no problem. It is all good. You fail to reject null hypothesis when null hypothesis is false. This is also good. Now, what I'm discussing in this slide is the most fundamental thing which you would have already gone through in the course. But I thought it is important us to revisit that so that we can take this discussion forward. Now, the problem comes when you are rejecting H0 when H0 is true, and you are failing to reject H0 when H0 is false. So this results in two types of errors. We call that as type 1 error and type 2 error, the false positives and false negatives. Now, what is p-value here? So p-value is the probability of committing a type 1 error, that is false positives. And what is the so-called statistical significance? Suppose in most of our studies, we fix it as 5% or 1% or whatever the number is. There is a threshold. So suppose it is 5%, which is most commonly used. We say that, look, I can tolerate the probability of committing a type 1 error as 5% or less. And that is what I fix as statistical significance. Now, this is what is discussed in the most basic econometrics. Okay, so I'll proceed further. Now, how to interpret this in the Kerala HNBR studies? Now, just before we go there, so here we discuss what is p-value, what is type 1 error, and what is statistical significance. So this whole idea of having a null hypothesis and an alternate, then collecting data from determining the sample size, collecting data, doing all the tests and all that, you come up with a p-value. And if the p-value is so-called, if it's very significant, then you reject the null hypothesis. So the idea of p-value traditionally has been that it has been to nullify the H0 or the null hypothesis. And this is based on the fundamental assumption that type 1 error is what you want to minimize, not the type 2. So in most of the econometric studies, we focus on how can we minimize the type 1 error. This is the classical context. Now, in the Kerala HNBR studies, how to interpret this? So there is a type 1 error and there is a type 2 error. Now, we have in the earlier slide, we have discussed about the journals like Community Genetics, Health Physics, scientists publishing in these journals, making claims about radiation versus health, that this relation is not statistically significant. Now, so there are two types of errors possible in this context. One is type 1, one is type 2. Type 1 error in this context means the study concludes that there is an evidence of adverse health effects or cancers due to natural radiation, but actually the adverse health effects are not caused due to natural radiation. So that is a type 1 error. What is a type 2 error in this context? The study concludes that there is no evidence of adverse health effects due to radiation, but actually these adverse health effects are caused due to radiation. Now, in this context, which error is more costly? Is it the type 1 or the type 2? If you take the case of type 1 error, if you make that error, what it means is this could lead to governments compensating money on the victims, when in reality the source of cancers or adverse health effects may be something else. This is one possibility of the consequence of making this error and going ahead with that kind of a decision. In type 2 error, what it can lead to potentially is it can lead to governments promoting activities such as building more nuclear plants, which has a more likelihood to increase human suffering due to increased incidence of cancer that could have been avoided. Now, if you look at the popular media, right, so this is what has been happening. So governments are coming up and telling that, look, I can build a nuclear plant in Kudankulam area. And so people who reside around that area don't worry about health effects because scientists have been studying the high natural background radiation areas in Kerala, and they have not been able to document a statistically significant relationship. So it is perfectly safe to assume that we can go ahead and build these power plants or and do such kind of things, which has got the potential to cause adverse health effects, which could have been avoided. Now if you look at this type 1 and type 2, which error is more costly? Is it type 1 or is it type 2? Okay, so rather than me asking you anything, maybe we'll have the discussion later. So in this context, type 2 error is more costly than type 1. The p-value or the statistical significance idea, which is typically associated with minimizing the type 1 error, has got no relevance in this context, because here we don't want to reduce type 1 error. We want to reduce the type 2 error because that is more costly. So committing a type 2 error has more serious consequences than committing a type 1 error. P-value has got no role to play here, because here in this context, what we need to be concerned about is how can I reduce the type 2 error, not the type 1. P-value only looks at the type 1 error. So that is one aspect. The second thing is the statistical insignificance. It does not mean that background radiation has got no impact on health. Now, taking this statistical insignificance seriously could have negative health effects and should not be the basis for good policy formulation. So this is how we were trying to interpret this in the Kerala HNBR studies. Now, the Kerala HNBR studies is what we had, we had kind of interpreted it. Now, there was a very interesting case in the US Supreme Court in 2011. So cutting the long story short, so what happened here was, so there was this drug manufacturer. I'm not. Let us not get into the names of the companies, names of drugs, and all that. So there was this manufacturer making drugs, and what was this drug? This drug was a remedy for common cold, and the manufacturer made this drug, put that in the market. Consumers started using that medicine or a drug, and for common cold, for getting relieved of common cold. And many patients or consumers who consumed that drug, they reported loss of smell, and they went to the court saying that, look, I had this drug and my smell was lost. Now what do? I need to sue this company. So that is where the court came in. The Supreme Court came in and asked this company, what is it that you were doing? You would have done a lot of trials. Didn't you find any of these side effects like loss of smell and all that? And if at all you found that, why didn't you report it? Because all these companies or manufacturers are supposed to report these findings in a particular filing which they give as part of the clinical trials that happens there. But what did the company say? The company said that, look, loss of smell was not important because it was not statistically significant. The p-value was more than 5%. So we thought, it is no need for us to report it that way because it was not significant. So a very different context from the Kerala HNBR studies, but the idea is still the same. What is the type 1 error which the company was committing here? There is evidence of loss of smell, but actually loss of smell is not due to the drug or medication. What is the type 2 error? There is no evidence of loss of smell due to the medication or the drug, but actually there is a loss of smell due to medication. Now, in this context, again, which error is more costly? Is it the type 1 or the type 2? If it was a type 1 error, then it makes all sense to have a so-called reducing p-value, statistical insignificance, and all that. But here, the idea was type 2 error is more costly. So what the court told the company was that, look, you need to balance these two kinds of errors before getting into a decision about whether this treatment or drug or medication causes this side effect or not. And they sued. So they gave a lot of these the company had to pay a lot of money and those kind of things, and ultimately the drug was withdrawn from the market. But the idea was this: as a company, as a manufacturer of drug, one needs to really have this delicate. One needs to strike a delicate balance between a type 1 and a type 2 error, rather than relying solely on statistical insignificance. So that was the point which was a part of this case. So this is a very famous case, and there is a lot of materials and all that available on the internet to read about this case. And there are more such case studies on such misinterpretations of statistical insignificance. This is a fabulous book. It is not a new book. It has been there for more than a decade or so. The Cult of Statistical Significance. So this book actually talks about a lot of these cases, ranging from pharma, manufacturing, and then criminal cases, where a lot of these decisions have been made by governments based on statistical significance versus insignificance. and that has led to loss of lives, jobs, justice, etc., etc. So for those of you who are interested, this book can be a good starting point to understand these kind of misinterpretations. So for me, when I started to work on this radiation article in 2012, so this book was the starting point, and this book is cited in Gujarati's textbook, Basic Econometrics. That is how I got to this book, and these authors, Ziliak and Mikulowski. And when I read this, then when I read the newspaper, the popular media talking about the significance aspect, and then when I actually read the journal papers where the scientists were reporting statistical insignificant result between radiation and health, I was like, yeah, we need to really write something about it. So that is how this paper or the article started in 2012. So this is one aspect, that is so this is what we have been discussing so far, that uh, you have to strike a very delicate balance between type 1 error and type 2 error, and not rely purely on the statistical significant result to see if the effect is there or not. So that is one school. Now, let us get into a more recent movement that has been happening across the world. This is a global movement against statistical significance, not against p-value though, but against using the so-called 5%, 1%, 10%, or all that, threshold values, and saying that, look, there is an effect because of this, there is no effect because of this. So there is a movement against this idea. So this is a very, very recent article where the authors from the American Statistical Association, where they urge scholars to go to a world beyond p less than 0.05. So this is one. So this has been signed by a lot of statisticians. They have been endorsed by a lot of people, saying that, look, enough is enough. We need to move ahead with, we should not be doing these kind of things anymore. And recently, there has been another article in the Nature where about 800 scientists from different disciplines came together and said that, look, we are not going to rely or we are not going to, like, for example, we are not going to believe that an effect is there because it is statistically significant or insignificant. Let us try to, let us try to avoid using the term forever. So that is a global movement that is happening these days. And in the article, we are also talking about that. But I did not want to, or we did not want to get so deeply into it, because this is a territory that is actually being discussed by very matured senior statisticians, and I'm not a statistician. So I did not want to go ahead and tell that, look, people studying the issue of adverse health effects in Karunagapalli should stop using the so-called significance test completely. So I didn't want to get into that kind of a debate. So that is why I'm just mentioning here it as a corollary, so that you guys can go ahead, read more about it, and be a part of this discussion. Now, this has gone to an extent in such a way that there is one journal called, which is a very decent journal, it's called Basic and Applied Social Psychology. They have gone ahead and said that we are going to ban p-values. So this happened in 2014 or 15. Now, what they have clearly said is the null hypothesis significance testing procedure is invalid. And they say that, look, if you're sending your papers to our journal, we don't want you to use it at all. So this basic idea of having a hypothesis, taking a sample, doing the test, and then reporting the significant result, they have completely abandoned this idea. Because what they say is, look, state of the art of this null hypothesis testing procedure is uncertain. There is still a lot of uncertainty, lack of clarity around this, and we have been making a lot of decisions based on these kind of things for the last decades. Let us not use this anymore. So this movement has gone to a certain extent where journals have kind of stopped entertaining this kind of an approach of statistical significance. So, but there is a point here. The point is that it is not that p-values are useless, or t-tests are useless, or confidence intervals are useless. No, that is not the idea. So what they are saying is, look, you do your test, you report all these results, but don't tell me that p less than 0.05 and put that 2 or 3 stars out there. That kind of an approach is kind of, it is, major journals are rethinking that approach. What they're saying is, look, you report p-values as a continuous number. Suppose you get a p-value of like 0.089, report it as 0.089. And if you're getting a p-value of 0.0019, report it like that. Don't put a lot of stars and then tell this is significant and all that. Rather, what they say is, the so-called significant ideas that should come out in the writing. You report confidence intervals, you report operating characteristic curves, you report the effect sizes, and then you try to argue as to why is it very important and all that, rather than telling, okay, this effect is there or this is not there based on the p-value. So that is what many of them are against these days. Before I stop, or before I complete talking about this, there is a closing comment which I would like to make. So this is a quote by Karl Popper, one of my favorite philosophers. So rather than me reading this quote again to you, I request you all to read this quote just for a few seconds. Take a few seconds, read this quote. And why Karl Popper is because Karl Popper is so he is the guy who's behind this modern philosophy of science, which says that you have to develop a falsifiable hypothesis, take evidence, and then try to fail to accept or fail to reject whatever, and that is how science proceeds. So he is the guy who wrote that book, the Logic of Scientific Discovery. It is actually based on that book or that philosophy of science that much of these scientific studies or tests are based on. The idea of having a hypothesis, collecting data, and then trying to refute it and all that. Now, he himself has gone ahead and said that, let me read the first line: the empirical basis of so-called objective science has nothing absolute about it. And essentially what he's trying to say is, look, whatever theories that we have built on the so-called objective science for so long, they are not based on rock solid foundations, but they are in essence based on some shaky foundations. And how firm are those foundations? Those foundations are not so firm, but at that point of time when somebody built that foundation, it was enough for us to go forward. Now, it can happen that somebody will come and say, look, this foundation is weak. Let us go more deeper and build a more strong foundation. So, in fact, this idea which he propounded long ago, this is what is actually happening in this discipline of econometric studies, statistical significance testing, etc., where you can see there is a global movement trying to say that, look, the foundations are weak, because these foundations on statistical testing, that threshold for p-value, these are based on what Fisher did, Ronald Fisher did, or Neyman Pearson suggested. Now, unless you go and understand their works, understand the history of statistics, it may not be easy for you to follow this global movement. So one piece of advice, if I may, is that it is high time that we get into this kind of a global conversation that is happening among scholars. So in your discipline, if you find that there is a lot of theory that is based on these, asterisks, statistical significance and all that, feel free to read these papers which these scholars are talking about and the existing literature, and try to critically look at it so that your confidence on these theories comes down a little bit. That is the whole purpose behind this article that we had written. Okay, so that is all from my side. I'm not elongating a lot more trying to talk about the same article, but I think I have presented the crux of our thinking to you so that we can have an engaged discussion going forward. So thank you very much. Thank you for the patient listening.
Thank you, Professor T.S. Krishnan. I would like the student participants to ask few things. I mean, before I give my sort of vote of thanks, and along with that, my feelings about the conversation we had.
Yeah, sure.
Jason, Johnson, and Zeba.
So what Johnson asked initially about randomized controlled trials, which is highly, I don't know, I don't know what to say now. But Johnson, I wanted to know from you, having had this discussion now on the so-called statistical significance, what do you feel about going ahead with these randomized controlled trials? Yes, I'm sorry if I'm putting you in a hot spot, but I just wanted to know your opinion. That's all.
No, sir. Actually, this class has made me a lot of confusions. Actually, because
Okay.
Because even though if there is a theory, but if we cannot, empirical support should be needed. No, like otherwise, people will say that no, these two groups are not different because there is no empirical support.
Yes.
Uh, So
That is right. That's right. So it's a confusing thing what is happening right now, and it is confusing for scholars like us also. But I leave that to Altaf. Sorry, Altaf, I stopped you short. Please continue.
No, no. I just thing is, I wanted them to ask you questions, so I'll
Okay,
just come
okay.
to that.
All right, all right.
Actually, Johnson's question is because I have not. They have started understanding stars, and they have
Okay,
started counting stars. Before they
okay.
started counting stars, they are told not to count stars. So that was like a warning thing. So
Yes, yes. So that is yes, yes. Yeah, yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
questions, Monica.
So
You are
yes, sir. So you talked
yes.
about attaining kind of a balance between type 1 and type 2 error. So
Yes.
how can we like make it possible?
Yeah. So that is so that is another big gray area. So there is no one way to make it possible, because in a lot of classical contexts which statisticians had been involved in long ago, in those circumstances, type 1 error was more costly. And that was one reason why they said, let us go ahead and let us get as low a p-value as possible so that type 1 error is minimized. Now, if you look at it logically, right? So what is type 2 error? Type 2 error is beta. Type 1 error is alpha. And beta, you cannot directly measure beta based on whatever state of the art understanding I have. But we have this concept called the statistical power, which is nothing but 1 minus beta. So what if you try to increase the statistical power of the test? So that could be one other possibility to reduce the type 2 error. But again, these are all possibilities. There is no so-called one stop solution in place. So people who study the statistical decision making, what they say is, look, this balance is very hard to achieve, but based on the contextual knowledge that you have, you need to make a stand telling that, look, this is what it has to be because of the knowledge of the context. So that is where your domain knowledge and all that comes into play. But as such, there is no straightaway answer to it. It is a gray area. I agree. And even most of the papers that I have cited in my article, they also tell the same thing. They say that it's not a straightforward thing that way. But then it is time to relook at it. That is what scholars are talking about. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Zeba, it's mandatory that
yeah. Please do not call me as sir. You can feel free to call me my name, Krishna.
that's an NIT culture. So serving is a part
Oh,
of
okay.
this colonial practices here.
Okay.
So
Okay. No problem.
Zeba, it's become mandatory that the architect on board also should ask a question.
So in architecture, are there these kind of econometric studies happening, or are they different? I don't know about the field.
As far as I know, from a student who studied in the level one course of this particular, she is using machine learning techniques in architecture. I mean, in remote
Okay.
sensing and machine learning, it's too much. Econometrics is commonplace. They run something called what we call as spatial autocorrelated regressions. So their regressions are highly spatially correlated. So they try to control for that, and they run a lot of regressions. That's what I know. And panel, I don't know. Maybe panel regressions. Time series also they are also doing. So the substantial econometrics coming up in architecture and planning. So they are like more planners, less of architects. Fatima, anything to ask? Can you, if there is an audibility problem, you can chat in and tell us if you have any question. Like often happens that Fatima's there's difficulty in speaking from that end.
Okay. Okay.
It's not a problem. Munira, do you have a questions? No, it's actually Munira sitting in her father's email ID. So
Oh, okay. All right.
okay, so I don't think I think Zeba is trying to speak something, but we are trying to understand. We can't hear it. It seems okay. Zeba, you can feel free to chat if you have some particular query or something. So yeah, okay, we'll wait for her this thing, and we'll wait for Munira's questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
So let me say something on the whole talk. So this whole conversation, this whole lecture, which Professor Krishnan has given, is something which I've been part of. I mean, I'm listening to for a longer period of time, because when Krishnan was our was my colleague as my FPM colleague in NIT, sorry, in IIM Bangalore. They were always after this idea. So I don't know, like Krishnan believes in qualitative research and is not so much into data. I mean, data-driven research. But I think he had sort of a vengeance against data-driven research.
No, no,
Like,
no, I don't have any vengeance against it. But
nothing. I'm just
please don't get me wrong.
yeah. So the thing is, he later took up jobs in data science and machine learning, directly from hardcore qual to quant. And now he's back in his academic position where he is, I don't know where he is going to pitch himself. Is he going to do too much of qual, or is he trying out his, I mean, quant? Because he has papers both in econometrics and qualitative research. So for me, this sort of debate, like, I ran n number of regressions in my life, thousands, lakhs, now close to crores,
Yeah,
for the
right.
last 10 years, 2010 onwards. I mean, for all the projects, all the activities, the obsession was on a single thing: get
Yeah,
3 stars,
yes,
get
yes,
2 stars. 1 star is itself a dismal thing. Oh, like
yes.
I'm sitting on a paper. I worked about 4 years to build a database of all towns in India with all its political correlates, of all its geographic correlates, put it together. A brand new panel data set was created, and I am out here running OLS panel, then Poisson, then negative binomial, all sort of regressions, but there's not even a single star on the key independent variable. So what would I do? So look at the look at that pain which goes through me for spending all the time on different platforms trying to assemble this data set, and finally finding no stars. I mean, that's an econometrician's misfortune. I mean, so that's what. So I can completely relate to what Krishnan says about, is lack of stars the end point of our research? Do you end pursuing that question when we don't? So I have a loads of questions. I have lots of papers which are lying in the back burner just because there are no stars. So how do you proceed beyond that point? So this is where Krishnan's paper comes in. You will get a context on understanding. I mean, if you could and relate to the context you speak about, then you will understand why this paper is of substantial importance. Like, he actually sensitized a huge issue from my hometown. I belong to Karnagapalli in Kerala, and actually we have the coast, and we were once very proud of the monazite deposits. So whenever one lorry comes around and it unknowingly throws sand to our house, so that what we call as the karimanal, we call it. That is like loads of thorium element. I mean, the element of thorium is around it, and we used to think that this will bring money to our places. This will bring a lot of lot of positive economic significance. Now, in the end, what happened was lots of cancers. We are a cancer hotbed in Kerala, and thanks to this whole thing. Now, most of the studies end up just like what Dr. Krishnan spoke to us about, that they always prove that, look, there's no significance, there's no statistical significance, you need not be worried. But the number of cancer patients in my neighborhood is growing how much? In Chavara, in Karunagapalli, in even if you go down south to the coast of Kanyakumari, right from there, the entire IRE belt, we call it, Indian Rare Earth Belt, so is under the same. So through that particular example, that particular context, he really demystifies the idea of statistical significance. That's where the relevance of the study comes in. So I think I'm indebted to him for having come to my session. I'm recording this. I'm like making sure that everybody who has other classes during this particular time. I mean, a lot of students having classes in this, because this our schedules are really jam packed these days. Now, but I'll make sure that this is available to all the students in my computer science and MBA and every department who has some inkling of interest in this. And surely I'll be discussing this in most of my classes there. So I'm really indebted to him for having come here, and I would like to ask Monica to give a, I mean, not a word of thanks perfectly, because you're keeping it very informal. But your word on it, Monica. I mean, you were the organizer of the whole thing. So can you give a, And simultaneously, Fatima Sehba has told that the significance of type 2 error becomes important. That okay, I think she's trying to answer that type 1, type 2 thing. Zeba is new to statistics and things, so she would try to demystify them, and will surely shoot a question on your official inbox. All these 4 people are going to trouble you the moment they start doing their real research. Now, can I have Monica to speak something rather than me speaking?
Yes, sir. So I think like Sehba had a question in that chat box.
Oh,
Like
okay.
she had actually asked a question.
Let me look in my chat box. How do I? Okay, here. Okay, okay. So the significance of type 2 errors becomes important here because of the context. In what context do we take type 1 error more important? So these are the classical contexts which we have dealt with in our textbook examples, right? For example, the whether a person is guilty or not guilty, or what, like for example, you put this product into the market. Is this product into the market releasing a higher significant sales or not, etc. So the lot of these classical contexts discussed in textbook examples, these are the contexts where type 1 error is more important. But when we extend that to a lot of other contexts, it becomes lesser relevant. But before I'm still at Fatima's question here, or her comment here. So see, as a scholar, and as all of us are scholars, what I would urge you to do is, now what I presented to you today, saying that look, p-value is type 1 error, which is said in the common textbooks, even that is questionable. Because if you, so for that, to understand that, you need to refer to the history. You need to study the history of statistics. uh, Starting from Neyman and Pearson, how did they come up with this idea of taking a sample, doing a testing, and then Fisher's idea. So Fisher was the one who introduced this idea of having a threshold value and telling it is statistically significant or not. So, and then a lot of other scholars started following them and building on them. But all of that was based on the specific constraints or context which they faced. Now, unless we actually understand where they were coming from, it will be hard for us to understand this type 1, type 2 just by reading basic econometrics textbooks. So I would strongly urge you that if you are really interested in this, go ahead, spend some time, read about the history of statistics so that you get a better understanding. Because even what I presented today, there is a much more nuanced argument to that. Because a lot of people tell that, look, Fisher's idea of significance was based on XYZ conditions at the time which Fisher faced during that time. And Fisher himself later came and said that, look, I should not have proposed this threshold at all because people have started using that as sacrosanct level of significance. So these are the kind of discussions which are there in the history. So if you could read that and then understand that and then look at these current conversations, then you will get a better understanding. Yeah. So that is my response to Fatima. So Johnson, is this error due to sampling error? No. So even if you have the correct sample and everything is correct, so that is why in the article we never critiqued their methodology. We said that even if the scientists had gone to Karunagapalli area and had done proper scientific studies, taking the correct sample, correct measurements, everything correct, even then, if they get p-value as insignificant, it doesn't mean that there is no effect of radiation on health, because that is not what p-value measures. So that is the point which we were trying to make. So this error is not necessarily due to sampling error. It is not because of that. Oh, so Johnson, were you asking about type 1, type 2 error, or the understanding of p-value?
No, sir. I just asked about the samples they have taken because, as Altaf sir has said, a lot of cancers are happening there. So if we compare with the other people, it should be significant. No? Like
No,
that.
no. So that is the thing. No. So see, this whole idea of significant, where did it come from? Who said that, if you collect a sample from an area with low radiation, collect sample from an area with high background radiation, and you compare these two means and you tell that it is not statistically significant, it means there is no impact of radiation on health. That is an incorrect way to understand p-value and significance. So that was the point I was trying to make in the presentation and in the article. It is a little hard to, so let me get this. Instead of getting into this global movement of scholars and all that, even if you read the basic econometrics Gujarati or some other textbook, they will have a short section on practical versus statistical significance. That can be a very good starting point for you. So this error is not due to sampling error. So it is not because of that. It can come in, but then even if the sample is perfect, this issue still comes. This issue is still relevant. But I'm not trying to discourage you to not to try out all this. You guys go ahead, do your empirical studies, do p-values, do whatever, because you just have to bear this in mind that in the future these things are going to come up in great frequency, because you can see that even journals like strategic management journal in the management community, the psychology journals, all these academic journals have started coming up with these editorial pieces that says, look, if you are going to submit to our journal, you better not do this. So you need to be mindful of that. It should not happen that you do your intense research for 1 or 2 years, and then when you decide that let me send it to this so and so economics journal, they would have put out an editorial saying, look, we no more want this statistical significance thing. It is highly likely to happen. So be careful about that. Have that in your mind so that whatever, even if you're not getting statistically significant result, there is a way to report the results and to interpret the findings, which in many of the editorials they would have given guidelines for doing that. So once you're familiar with all these conversations, it will be easy for you to take it to heart and then go ahead and do it. Otherwise, it will be a root shock. You do your study, you find out somehow you get those p-values. When you try to submit to a journal, you find they have put out an editorial like this. So you should not be in a root shock when you come across these situations.
Okay, so I think Monica can give her a final take and wrap it up.
Yes, sir. Professor Krishnan, it was actually a wonderful opportunity because, I didn't expect this. Like, I thought you'd come up with maybe a paper that you did, and we'll all be discussing everything related to the results and findings. But this was interesting. I was hooked. So I was okay, natural background radiation. I reside in Kerala, but I've still not been aware of this. So it was new, and it caught my attention. And then you suddenly you're okay, let's get into this debate, and here we are, and we're okay, maybe we are taking type 1 error a little too seriously, and we are ignoring type 2 error, or so then I was okay, so this is what happens when Hindu releases a lot of news articles based on papers that have been published.
Yes.
And you find I've read on this with regards to consumption, food consumption, I think, and minimum wages and stuff. So this was suddenly I felt okay, fine, we've always been obsessed with p values, and there's no instance where you you do a study and you're oh my god, you're not getting that p value. Okay, fine. So here what I understood from this class in this session was that okay, there is something else. There's always the other side.
That's
and that
right.
you have to look to the other side. It's not that we should not be so obsessed with p values such that you want to enforce it in your research or in whatever project you're doing. But even if it is even if you don't get the stars, you can still interpret a result and say, okay, this is what we did. So it's more about something that is more genuine rather than being so obsessed with a p value. So this is something very new, and yes, I think all of us will be reading on this, because as a researcher, we should be aware of what is happening.
Yes. So in your research, you're right. So in your research, you may not implement it right away, but be cognizant about these conversations that are happening in the global community of scholars. I think that is a good strategy for us to go ahead. Otherwise, as Johnson pointed out, we'll be confused. We'll not know what to do then. So.
So this was very new. It was very novel, and so I want to thank you on behalf of everyone in my class, and especially Dr. Altaf, and for this opportunity. And it was really great meeting you, sir.
Sure, Monica. Thank you very much. Thank you all for inviting me and listening to this and engaging in this discussion. Thank you.
So we can disperse. So please feel free to write to Dr. T.S. Krishnan when you have any really philosophical questions regarding research. He is somebody who really wants to understand research He's always curious about it, like a kid. I mean, the new the epistemology, the metaphysics, everything. So I can't think in those terms. So whenever you have a really deep question about methods in research, especially if you're ever thinking about doing qualitative research in any stage of your career, whether you tomorrow when you become a faculty, please, he is one person whom you can actually connect for getting more clarity about your question and, of course, guidance. Thank you, Krishnan,
Thank you. Thank
and
you, Alka.
we would soon see in other. They would soon see you in other contexts too. Sure.
Sure, sure. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good day.